All right. So week 5, I've I've heard from a couple people that it would be helpful to have a kind of like a review of the quiz, um, kind of just like to kind of go over it just a little bit. So I thought we could kind of do that um, real quick. Go over actually one of last week's quizzes, just to kind of talk through some of the questions. I will say that I believe it gets a little easier. The first couple weeks, I feel like are some of the questions are worded just a little weird, but I do think it gets a little bit better. Let's take a look here. All right, so to kind of like go over some, and I'm just going to do like one preview. So there may be questions that you may have gotten, and always happy to kind of take those at a case by case basis, but just wanted to kind of go over this because some of the questions are worded a little bit weird. And just for context, a lot of these questions, I believe they come from a certification kind of bank. So they're a little bit higher level as far as like I think like English and reading comprehension. So, um, and why they might just be a little bit funny. MySQL supports a join between a table and the result from a query because the query's result becomes a temporary table. That's true. And I don't have the book in front of me, so I mean, but I guess like a point to some of this is why a reason why these quizzes are open book, open note, is because they are certification exams. I feel like sometimes they put little not gotchas in there, but you have to like examine the whole thing. Because you could just say supports a join between a table and a result from a query and say, yeah, of course it does. But, does it become a temporary table? You'd want to make sure you understood that. Examining the following type of query, which type of ANSI SQL 92 join is it using? In this case, it's a cross join because it does not specify an on clause or a where clause. Straight join keyword. Request that tables are joined in a specific order. I believe that's true. I'm actually not super familiar with straight joins off the top of my head. Supports copies, 2 copies, true. I believe that's false. Anyways, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I do think the questions get a little easier, and I don't know if going over these is going to be helpful or not. If you have a specific question about one, maybe send me one. I know these Harry Potter ones get a little crazy, but actually this is the first term that I haven't had someone kind of ask about those. But we can talk about that if it comes up. But anyway, so I kind of wanted to spend a little time on the exams, just because I know there's been some concern there. So anyways, make sure you read the whole prompt, and kind of look for any of those things. Don't be too hasty with it. And they are open book, open note for a reason. A lot of the times it's because, it's not going to be a simple Google search and Stack Exchange is going to have the exact question word for word, so to speak. So yeah, but if you come across the question and you're like, wow, I didn't see this anywhere in the reading, and even when I was online, kind of searched, couldn't find anything about it, shoot it over. Happy to take a look. All right, let's jump into this week's stuff. So this week, really working with sets, and really what it comes down to is union. And basically, last week we kind of talked about this a little bit last week, where with joins we add data horizontally. But with sets, we're going to do some joins, do some adding of records, and we're going to add data vertically. So instead of adding columns, we're going to add rows. Basically just combine 2 queries. So that's kind of what sets are. And I know we talked a little bit about this last week. and I don't want to spend a ton of time on it now because I kind of want to get more into final project type stuff. So anyways, really gonna kind of lean on last week, and I have a couple quick bite videos I shared. The one thing that I would point out is that you're gonna read about some of these different set operations, and MySQL does not support them. And the reason being is because, well, this is gonna come off a little harsh, but so, and I know we've talked about this before, but Oracle is kind of like the parent company that kind of maintains MySQL. And in fairness to them, they do it kind of out of the goodness of their hearts, like, which I'm sure, is some expense, but MySQL is a free open source product that they're maintaining. However, they also, build Oracle database, which was kind of like the original kingpin of the database software. So, naturally, they've kind of created a free product that competes with their paid product. And as you can imagine, um, there wouldn't be much benefit to making the free product, the best, because it would compete. So I believe that they kind of leave that out on purpose, simply because, it's a reason to upgrade, so to speak. And that's completely my opinion. I don't know of any technical hurdles in the background that may or may not exist, but other database systems, in fact, almost all the rest of them, such as Microsoft SQL Server, Postgres, they support a lot of those things. So as you read through the book, you'll notice that it'll say, "Oh, MySQL does not support these," and that will in turn come up during the exam questions. So if you get some of those exam questions that talk about, will this work on MySQL? Make sure you pay attention to which one it is, because it might be no, just because MySQL doesn't support it. All right. In fact, does anyone here that's in person have any questions about the union's set operations? I kind of want to just get a feel, because there's not very many of us here, and I have some previous recordings with the quick bites, so I don't want to spend a lot of time of it. So I'll kind of leave it up to you guys. Do you guys want to go over kind of the weekly material, or do you want to go over final project stuff more? Because we can just dive straight into the final project, spend a little bit more time kind of covering next steps there that you should probably take, or we can kind of cover some weekly material and then kind of switch gears. Does anyone have a preference? And specifically, because I'm leaning more to covering the final. So if you have any desire to kind of go over the weekly material, we can do that too. This is a lighter week. The set operators are fairly straightforward, I feel. So far it is crickets. Anyone have any preference?
Probably the final.
Okay. Any different opinions on that regard?
No, I was just gonna agree with them. Just the final's fine with me.
Okay, we will do that then. And real quick question, for those of you here, how many of you here have your ERD done? Are you guys past the point of your ERD?
Mine's done.
Perfect. Okay. Sweet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to real quick build a little tiny model just from scratch here. And really what I want to do is just kind of do like a small little example so that we can kind of start going over what the next steps are. And I'm going to show you kind of my preferred kind of way of doing it, which I would recommend, simply because it's going to save you guys in the long run, I think, a bunch of time. So I'm actually going to just kind of build a new model here real quick. And what I'm going to do is just kind of really, I'm just going to kind of build like a super simple kind of database here. And I haven't really thought through what it's going to be. Oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do like kind of like how to track like cars, right? Vehicles. So I'm going to have a manufacturer table. So that'll be like your GMC, Chevy, Honda, those kinds of things. Manufacturer ID, int primary key auto increment, and we're going to give it a name, varchar 45, that can't be null. And, you know, I'm just going to keep it simple for right now. So we're just going to go with that. And as we know, you know, we have our manufacturer, and then we have our model. Or let's see. Yeah, let's do a model. We have our model ID, int primary key auto increment, and let's give it a name. It's not null, and some other types of models. They might have like a number and a code, something like that. And I'm also going to put in like a start year. Let's do int and end year. Which is an int. So there's our model, and we're missing one thing, which is our manufacturer. Manufacturer ID. Which is an int. Normally I put this up here. I don't know if it does it anymore. Move up. Oh, there we go. And while I'm here in the model table, I'm just going to real quick build a foreign key. So I'm going to call this model key 1, and it's going to reference manufacturer based on the manufacturer ID. There we go. And then my last table is going to be, because like we have the model, I'm going to do, I could call it a package, but I'm more tempted to call it a variant. Because not all the time are they packages. Description. You know what? Actually, instead of I'm going to call it variant, because instead of doing cars, we're going to do maybe like a tractor or something just to make it different. Text, and let's do 500. And we need a model ID. I should probably do my foreign keys first, so I don't have to do that step. Variant underscore of K1. All right, so here's our little database, right? And it's just going to have manufacturers, a model, and a variant. So nice and simple, nothing too complex, but we do have a little bit of a hierarchy. So, because kind of what I want to do, because you would build your ERD, get it up to where it has 10 tables, right? And then from here, what we want to do is we want it to actually build our database. So this is what I would recommend is once we're here, so we have our model built. So first of all, what I would do is I'd save your model. So we can save model, and I'm going to call it, you know, vehicle DB. You know, let's just call it something simple. So I'm going to save that model just so that way we have it. But then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to database, and I'm going to say forward engineer. But before I do that, I'm actually going to go to my desktop, and let's just build a new folder. And I'm going to call this vehicle DB. Whatever you call your project, you can even just name it final project. But I'm going to put this file here just so I have a kind of a place to put all my stuff. And then inside this file, I'm going to create another folder, and I'm going to call it lib for library. Because this is kind of where I'll put some of my stuff. And I'm going to actually move this over here, put this in here. That way I have my model, and then in lib, we're going to put some scripts that we're going to generate. So anyways, once I kind of have that base structure, feel free to do that however you want. That's kind of how I like it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this forward engineer option. So forward engineer, and this is where we can put in like our connection. So I'm going to go ahead and say continue. And it's going to bring up some options. So just to kind of go over these, we can skip the creation of foreign keys. We really don't want to do a lot of this stuff. Really, I don't think. Other objects we don't have to worry about. We shouldn't have any. What we are going to do in this code generation, we're going to select the option to drop objects before each create. We're going to omit schema qualifier and object names. Okay, so I'm gonna check those two, and that's it. So you're gonna have these three, because basically what this is gonna do, when we create a table in the database, it exists forever. And so if I were to build these tables and then try to change something and rerun the script, it's actually going to fail because it'll say, hey, it already exists. Because there's a way to build a table and then there's a way to change it. And sometimes you can't change stuff depending on what it is. So when we're in this kind of like development mode, the easiest thing to do is just to build the whole table and delete it and rebuild it. And that's kind of what we're going to walk through here, is go over, hey, let's save our code so we can do this over and over. And then I'm going to omit the schema qualifier in the object name, so that way we can create multiple versions of our database if we want. So anyways, once I select those, I'm going to hit continue, type in my password, and export the table objects. Great. I'm going to hit continue. And on this screen, it actually is going to generate all this SQL for us. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to save to file, and I'm going to call this vehicle DB underscore schema. And the reason I'm going to call it schema is because this is what's building our table structure, or the schema itself. So I go ahead and I'm going to save this in my lib folder of the place we just made. So it's saved. And then I'm just going to hit, at this point, we can close the window, right? So I'm just going to close this. And now that I'm here, I'm just going to close my ERD, close the MySQL. And now that I'm back in just my normal workbench, I'm just going to go to File, Open. And we may have to somewhere, oh, right here. So there's this little button where we can open a script. And I'm just going to open this vehicle DB underscore schema.sql. And there we go. So now this is kind of like the code that's going to create our stuff here. But what I'm going to do before I get started, because I have, you'll notice that I don't even have Sequila right now. So the first thing we want to do is actually create our database. So I'm going to say I'm going to say create database. And now I can name this database whatever I want, but to be consistent, I'm just going to name it vehicle underscore DB. So I'm just going to say create database vehicle underscore DB. And I'm going to run that. and you'll notice that it's green. It worked. I can right click in here and say refresh, and now I'll have this vehicle DB. So now inside of our script, what I'm going to do is right at the beginning, I'm going to say use vehicle underscore DB. And what's nice is depending on whatever we put here, this is where it'll build these tables. And we'll kind of go over that here in just a minute. So now what I'm going to do is we've probably gotten used to running this one. I'm going to do the one that will execute the whole script. So I'm just going to click this, and if we look, it should have went through and kind of built all of this stuff. So we can go through, and you'll notice some warnings because it says drop table if exists. The warnings are normal because the table didn't exist yet. Now, what's nice is I can run this again, and you'll notice that there's no errors at all. And that's because we did that thing where it would drop it. So, I can change this as much as I want, this file now, and it'll just recreate it. Like if I wanted to rename a column or add a column, I can just change it here in the code instead of having to go to my model, change it there, update it, and do all that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's easiest I think it's easier just to save this code because you can just rerun it, which we're going to kind of go over here in just a minute. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create a new script, and I'm going to call this cleanup.sql. And what this is going to do is it's actually just going to kind of delete everything. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have it delete the whole database. If you wanted to, you could have it go through and delete each table. But honestly, it might be easier to just have it drop the whole database. So cleanup.sql, we're going to say drop database vehicle DB. And then I'm just going to recreate it. So create database vehicle DB. We can even comment this. Delete the database. And just so you know, when we drop something, it's gone forever. So only do this if you have a way to kind of systematically rebuild everything, which is what we're going to talk about. I'm going to remake it. So I'm going to go ahead and save this file. And again, I'm going to put it in my lib folder, and I'm just going to call this cleanup.sql. All right, so what's nice is I can run my cleanup.sql and immediately turn around and run my other one. So just to kind of show that, if I go into my desktop and vehicle DB, yes, sure, and lib. So here's my scripts. So once I'm in here, I can do MySQL-u root-p. Oh, and of course, like I said, I just installed it. So let's do this. I'm going to click on home, right click here, start command line client. Sure, go ahead. All the weird Mac stuff. There we go. So the only problem is because I'm here, I'm at my root kind of directory, so I don't have access to it. But the most important thing is I have this. So I'm actually going to copy that, and inside of my terminal, let's do a new window, and I'm going to go to desktop, vehicle DB, and lib. And now I should be able to just paste this into -u root -p. There we go. All right, so now what I can do is I can say source cleanup.sql, and then I can say source vehicle VB. What do I call that file? Vehicle DB underscore schema. Oh, no database selected. Let's try. Oh, that's because we didn't save it. Yeah, so we got that error that no database was selected, and that's because in here we haven't saved this. So let's go ahead and hit save on that. And then again, this is why this is handy. To make sure we're all good, I'm going to source cleanup.sql again. And then I'm going to say source. Let's just do this. Here we go. And you can see that I can rerun this over and over and over again, no problem. So anyways, it should be good. So just to go through that again, once we have this set up, we can run cleanup.sql. And when we run source, we're just running it. So, and then we can run vehicle underscore schema.sql. There we go. So now you can see we're basically just executing these scripts over and over, no problem. And that's kind of where I like to be, because then we can make any adjustments that we need or anything like that, and kind of build as we go. So this is kind of like where I like to kind of kick things off, because not only do I have like all my tables built, but if I need to make a little change, which I can almost guarantee it's going to happen, you're going to be like, oh, I forgot this or something or another. You can just quickly go into the code and edit it and just rerun all your scripts. And then you're good. Because the next script we're going to make is the one that we're going to get started on next. So if you remember back to our deliverables, we had our ERD, which, you know, at this point we should be just kind of polishing up this week, honestly. The end of week 5, you should be kind of polished up. And then next week, or if you're a little bit ahead of the curve, really what we want to do is we want to start diving into getting our test data in, but we want to save all those. Like we don't want to just put it in and not have the SQL to do it, because we're going to use those also as our test cases. So once we kind of hit this point, we're going to start kind of muddying the water between our test cases and our CRUD statements. And our CRUD statements are basically, believe it or not, we actually have CRUD statements here. These kind of count as CRUD because they create a table, but really what we're going to do is we're going to create our insert statement. So let's go ahead and create a new script, and I'm going to call this vehicle db underscore seed.sql. And what the seed script does is it inserts or seeds data into the database. And really, this is just going to be sample data. So what we're going to do is we're going to pretend as if people were actually using our software, and we're going to put data into our tables. And to kind of show you a couple shortcuts, so like if we want to start with the root of our data, right? So if we go back and look at our model, we had our manufacturer kind of at the top of the tree. And that's because, we can't have a model without a manufacturer, and same thing with variant. We can't have a variant without a model. So every time we build something, we have to start kind of at the root. So I'm going to start with manufacturer. And if you right click on the table name over here, you can go copy to clipboard and an insert statement. And I'm just going to make a comment, and I'm going to say manufacturer and paste this in here. So I'm going to put a couple manufacturers in here. You'll notice it kind of puts things in here for me, and I'm super picky about formatting because I like things to be nice and easy to see. So when you copy this, it's going to tell you it's going to put in a manufacturer ID as well, the primary key. But if you set that to auto increment, the best thing you can do is just delete that and let it handle it for you. So we're going to build everything so it works regardless. So then all we have to do is just simply give it what value we want to insert for the name. So in this case, I'm going to put in John Deere. right? And then I'm actually, what's cool is we can go ahead and run this. So I'm just going to run this one query, and you'll notice it worked. We could select it and test it, but I know you guys trust me, so we're going to just keep plugging away here so we can get through this. I'm going to add a couple others. So I'm going to do case. And if you're not familiar with tractors, these are tractors. And then we're going to do New Holland. All right, so there's manufacturer, nice and easy. That one's pretty simple because it's just a name. You know, if I had more time, we could have put in something like, you know, something that would be fun is we could put in like their two colors, right? And we could do it in hex, so that way when we load a web page, it uses the hex color that's in the database for each manufacturer, right? So we could have a lot of fun and do stuff like that, but this is just kind of the demo, kind of how to set up your projects. So there's manufacturer. I'm just going to put in a couple. Really, you only need one per table. So, you know, I'm going to put in a couple. Obviously, it'll get a little less as we get down the chain. Because if you did 3 manufacturers and 3 models, you either have one per manufacturer. Anyways, it could get messy. So, really only need to do about one. So, we're going to do model. Again, I'm just going to take copy to clipboard and insert statement and paste. And again, it kind of puts it into my rule of thumb is if it all fits on one line, easy. And really it's like less than 5 columns, I'll do that. But where this one has more, I'm actually going to keep it. So, and basically the way these insert statements work is we just put them in the order that they come. So whatever order that we list them here, we're going to put them in the same order down here. And again, we're going to get rid of the model ID and put it down here. Now, this is again where we're going to hit this place where we are going to start thinking about all of our deliverables. So in our deliverables, we have these things called Crud. So let's hurry and save this file. So we're going to save this one, save script as, again, inside of our lib folder. And I'm going to call this vehicle db underscore seed.sql. So that's going to be our seed script because it's going to just put data into our model for us. But the other thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to actually make a CRUD. And I'm actually going to do this CRUD underscore test case .sql because we're actually going to do both. So part of the deliverable is you need a create, read, update, and delete for every table. And so I kind of think of this as more of like, hey, where can I write my notes? Like every time I test something or that, we can do that. So I'm going to start with manufacturer. And in each table, we're going to need a create. And I'm just going to do this. Insert a read. Select update and delete. So for each one of our tables, we're going to need one of these. Basically, how do we create one? How do we basically do each of them? So I'm going to do this for manufacturer, model, and variant. But for right now, I'm just going to start here. So for our insert, it's actually pretty easy because it's in our seed data. So I'm just going to take one. I'm just going to take one here and copy it over. So we're just going to do the John Deere one, right? And just to test, I'm going to say select everything from manufacturer and manufacturer where name is equal to John Deere. Oh, and the one thing we want to do is use vehicle UV. We're going to run that, run this. Oh, that's our insert. Got it. Oh, so That's a good case. This is a great example. So see how I can run this like 100 times? It's going to just keep inserting it. I probably should have put a unique on that column, which I'm going to now. Right. But we found that out after the fact. So now I select everything. And if we take a look here, if we take a look, I have a bunch of John Deeres, right? We don't want that. So this is where these scripts come in really, really handy, right? Because you can see I accidentally did this multiple times. We actually don't want to allow that. And we want this to be unique. So what I can do is I can come back into my schema, go to my model, or sorry, my manufacturer, and our name. Not only do we want it to be not null, we also want it to be a unique constraint. So now there's a couple things we can do here. I believe we can put it in line, unique. So I think we can do this, and we may try it, but the first thing we're going to do, so I'm going to run my cleanup. And the nice thing is I can run this without any worry because everything that I do in my database is recorded in code. So if I, even though I just deleted everything in my database, I can very quickly iterate on it because now all I have to do to rebuild it is say source vehicle DB underscore schema vehicle DB schema. And there we go. And I can go make sure there's no errors, which it looks good. Yep, looks good. So just that easy, we were able to add a unique constraint on our manufacturer name. Well, we'd probably want to do the same thing for our model, but what if two manufacturers had the same model? Anyways, that's something that you'll have to figure out on your own, but for now, we're just going to keep going. So just that easy, we were able to recreate our whole schema. So I'm going to right click here and refresh. And now we should have a unique constraint on our manufacturer table. So now if I go here, I can come back in here and run this. And if I hit it again, now it should give me an error saying, hey, you can't do that, duplicate key entry. So perfect. Just what we wanted. So let's do Holland. Now, technically I could just rerun this script because we're kind of, I knew it'd error out on this one. So we're just going to kind of run them manually right now while we're kind of building here. So anyways, in our CRUD statement, I just copied that one over, which is great. Now we can run this and we only get the one row, which is exactly what we want. We don't want 100 John Deeres. We just want one. All right, in our update, so we can just do a fake update. Really, we're never going to run our CRUD statement. So just as an FYI, these other scripts we kind of are building so we can rerun them a lot. This one is really just for notes. It's just kind of for reference. So when we hand this off to the web developer, they can utilize this stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to say update manufacturer, and we're going to set name equal to John Deere, where name is equal to John Deere. This doesn't make any sense because we're just setting the name to each other. Or let's pretend that there's a typo, right? So let's say someone wrote Deere the old way without the extra E. We could fix that. Now, this isn't actually going to do anything, but we just have to write one that works. So we did it, no rows affected, we're done. Now, if we wanted to test this, we could, do whatever, but we're going to just pretend. And then we're going to do another one where we say delete from manufacturer, where name is equal to John Deere. And like I said, we want to make sure these work, so I'm going to run it. And sure enough, we deleted a row. So now if we were to try to select it, it would be gone. But like I said, because we have all of our code here, we can just put it right back in. So that's kind of our CRUD statement. So now we have our CRUD statement for manufacturer. Now, the reason why I kind of jumped over here to show you the CRUD is because we're actually going to use this. Like I said, this is actually kind of like a little MIDI notes, and you'll find that it's useful. So when we're going to put a model in, right? So I'm actually an antique tractor enthusiast somewhat, and and in fact, I have a John Deere Model B. And so we're going to put the Model B in. So on our model, let's throw it in. But you'll notice the first thing, because we're not putting in the model ID, we're just starting with manufacturer ID. Now I could go over here and say, oh, what's the manufacturer ID for John Deere? Well, let's find out, right? Oh, and it's 5. But we know it's not 1 because we just deleted it and re-added it. And so if I want my code to work all the time, we want to make this as dynamic as possible. So what I'm actually going to do, the only way to make it dynamic is to use a subquery. So this is why the final project is so valuable, because instead of actually hard coding a value, I'm just going to tell it to find where it is. So instead of selecting everything, I'm going to select the manufacturer ID from manufacturer where the name is equal to John Deere. And in fact, I'm going to change this select statement to only pull the manufacturer ID. Manufacturer ID. So now when we run this, you'll notice it pulls 5. So now if I were to run this, once we finish it, it should pull 5. So this select statement is just going to do 5. It's basically the same thing as if I just put a 5 here, like this, right? The only difference is if it ends up being 1 next time, like it would be because we create it first, it's gonna fix it. So anyways, let's undo that. So there it is. And our model. So our model name is going to be the B. And I'm actually going to type in Model B because I think John Deere actually calls it Model B. In number, even though it's called number, I made it a varchar for this reason because we're just going to put a B. The code is also going to be a B. Start year, that's a great question. Let's take a look. John Deere Model B. You can see the variants, serial numbers. So the first one was built in 1935. So we're going to go ahead and throw in 1935. And remember, because 1935, I believe I made it an integer. I hope I did. I'm pretty sure I did. We don't put strings around it because it's just a raw number, right? So 1935, and they made those all the way up until, well, they said final, but we're going to go with 1952. Pretty long stint for tractors. All right, so there's our thing. So let's go ahead and run this. And there we go. Now we have that. So now I'm going to jump over, right? So we just created a model. I'm going to copy this. We're going to pop over to our Crud file. And in our model, since we just did an insert, I'm just going to save one copy, right? We don't need all of them. We just need one. And we haven't saved this file, so I'm just going to do that real quick. And I'm going to call this crud underscore test case .sql. Yep, perfect. And while I'm here, I'm just, so we can test, I'm going to say select model ID from model where manufacturer ID is equal to, and see, this is where this comes in handy, because what if there's 2 manufacturers that made a Model B, right? So what I'm going to do is make sure we're only pulling dynamically for John Deere. So let's format this so it makes sense here since it's getting a little long. So we're going to get it where the manufacturer is equal to John Deere, manufacturer ID, and the name is equal to a Model B. So we run this. There's our 1 row. Perfect. Now, like we said, what if we wanted to, and let's make sure we save our script. So save that. We're good. Now, we talked about it because I could actually rerun this where we insert and we'd end up with 2 model Bs, right? On this. It worked fine. And the problem is now when I run this, I get 2. So now I have 2 model Bs. And so we want to fix that, right? So again, we can come back into our vehicle DB underscore schema and fix this. Now, what I'm going to do, because I showed you how to create a unique column, but in this case, like I said, we could have a model B that's for case and it would be totally valid. So we don't want to make a unique name because then once one company takes a name, you know, it couldn't be put in again. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we put kind of the same kind of, we're going to put in like enough stuff that it has to work kind of that way. So anyways, let's say create, because I'm going to do this one a little different. And this one we're going to do with an index. So I'm going to say create unique index, and then I give it a name. And in this case, I'm going to call it model underscore UQ1 for unique one. And basically we just say what we want it to be on. So create unique index model, and we can say, yeah, we want it to be on, let's do manufacturer ID name. So create unique index model underscore UQ1 on model, and then we kind of give it the name of the columns. So now what's fun is if we do this out of line, we can actually just create this, but I want the code to exist here so that it recreates it. So I'm going to run this. You'll notice I get an error and it says key column manufacturer ID doesn't exist in table. And that's because I misspelled it. Manufacturer ID. So let's try again. And again, menu. Model.
You're missing a U. It's MANU.
Ah, yes, thank you. Okay, let's try now. Key one is you gotta spell right. Okay, so you'll notice that I went to go put this on, but the problem is it says, hey, I can't turn this on because you actually already have duplicates in there. So I can't say that it can't be duplicates because you've already broken the rule you're trying to create. So basically what we're going to do is, again, we're going to use our, now that we know that this works, I'm going to save it and we're going to kind of go through this again. So we're going to go to our terminal. I'm going to say source cleanup.sql, source, and you know what, real quick, yeah, let's source vehicle db underscore schema.sql and source vehicle db underscore seed.sql. Oh, and apparently, did I save this in the right place? Oh, and I just misspelled it. So let's do this. We have it saved, so I'm just gonna close it there. Fix it. And what I'm actually gonna do, because I'm tired of typing vehicle DB, I'm actually just gonna have it be seed schema, just like that. So close this. There we go. File. And then we can say open. I'm going to open this one and this one and this one. Oh, apparently it won't let you open two. So we're going to start with schema and then seed. There we go. We can say source seed.sql. There we go. All right, so now we're back in action. And so you can see as we miss things when we create our ERD, we can very quickly kind of like make the edits and very quickly rebuild everything. That's what I really like is that way you don't have to forward engineer forward engineer every time and go do all that. Like I think there hits a point where you're kind of just like going and, you know, hey, I want to reinsert all my data and just have it work. All right, so that's kind of how I like to set it up. So kind of end up with those kind of base files, and then you could kind of run them. But just as a word of caution on our command line, if you choose to do it that way, you can always do it through the terminal, or sorry, through Workbench. You know, if you just have them open, like for example, if I wanted to clean up, you know, I can just use the lightning bolt without the cursor. So it just dropped everything. You'll notice it disappeared over here. I can refresh and it's there, but it's empty, no tables. And then we can do the schema. There it is. And finally, our seed. So you can kind of do it with the terminal or with Workbench, whichever's easiest for you. But what's nice is you can just have it actually execute the whole page of commands, which is the way it's kind of supposed to work. And then we can kind of do it. All right. One thing that we forgot to put in here is use vehicle DB. All right. Now, one thing I wanted to show you real quick is let's say that down the line, right, you have everything working and you have a lot, right? Now, hopefully everything we do, we have like this where we can run 3 files and everything's back. But let's say that for whatever reason, you want to kind of create a working copy to kind of test something in first, right? So, which eventually is real life, right? Like eventually, if we have an app running that uses this, like, or something that, you know, it's running this website, we probably don't want to make like major changes to it in production. So what we're going to do is in our schema file, I'm going to call this vehicle_dev, right? And this is kind of like our development one. So, but before I can use this, we have to create it. So over here, I'm just going to create a new database called dev, create database vehicle_dev, which stands for our development server. I'm just going to run that. Now, if I refresh this, we should have a vehicle dev. Now, if I go over here to my schema and I just run this whole thing, because I put this use vehicle dev here, it actually just created all my tables on dev. And same thing if I go to my seed, I can just change this one line of code here, run the whole thing. And now I have all my data in 2 tables or in 2 databases. So essentially with a lot of ease, I've just duplicated my test data in 2 different databases. So we can just give it a different name. So that way, like if you want to give someone like a sample to say, hey, you know, try this database, you can just give them really all you need to do is give them your schema and your seed files, and they can have your whole sample database running on theirs, which is pretty cool. Cool. Does anyone have any questions thus far? We're about out of time, so we may be here, but does anyone have any questions? Has this been helpful? This should be the kind of the next steps that we kind of go to is we're going to basically what I would recommend is start by just putting at least 1 row in every table, kind of the way that we were doing. And as you go through it, you know, put it in your seed file so you can just run that to kind of put all your data in. But also put it in your Crud test case. And if you want, just kind of fill in the gap as you do each table. That's kind of like how I would do it. Because then that way it's done. By the time you finish inserting all your data, your test data, you really have like everything here that you need. And then from there, we can talk about the UI map and stuff next week. But does anyone have any questions?
I have a question. Will you go over that the model B thing you did to make it so that it was unique, but that you could still use it in the other table just one more time? Like walk through
Yes.
what that command is actually doing.
Yes. Yep. Good call. 'Cause I think I got stuck on the spelling. So basically what this is doing is it's creating a unique index. So even when up here on manufacturer, when we put unique here, it actually created a unique index here, just kind of under the hood for us. In fact, if I go to manufacturer here and click on indexes, you'll notice that it has name here listed under an index on that table. We didn't define it manually like I did for model. And so if it's simple like this, where it's just on one column, you can throw it in like this, right? But in our case, we kind of wanted it a little bit more complex because we wanted it on not one column, but two, right? Because as long as, like, for any given manufacturer, they should be able to have their own kind of model. So for example, you have the Chevy trucks and the GMC trucks that both share common numbering schemes, like 1500 or 2500, 3500, those kinds of things. So what differentiates those, because if we just said, hey, unique name, once we put in that Chevy 1500, GMC could no longer use 1500 as a name. So
Right. So
what we
there's no
did,
way we could do that in our ERDs. It has to be in this part.
correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So good different. I was just getting there, but you beat me to the punchline. So kind of the big punchline that I like to kind of push here, especially with this, not only does it give benefit to just running your scripts, but there also is limitations. You know, the GUI is great, I think, for kind of getting the bulk of your idea. I use it too, actually, for the same reason. Because you can save a lot of like just manual typing, just, you know, by quickly throwing it together, because it's super nice to kind of get your bulk of your table structure. But once you kind of get that table structure, when you kind of get into the nitty gritty of things, you have to do it in code. And kind of my concept here is that, you know, like I said, even if you ran this once, it would stay in the database forever, which is great. But what happens when we need to drop this table because we need to fix something, right? You always have to remember to rerun this command. So that's why, especially like for building like the schemas and putting your sample data in, I highly, highly, highly couldn't recommend enough to put everything you do in a script, because then that way, if we need to start over, like if I accidentally drop something, drop a table, we can very quickly just rebuild it, right? If my computer dies, I mean, you know, you can save your schema in your seed, you can save these .sql files on your Google Drive and, or, you know, back them up or whatever, and as long as you have those files, you can recreate everything. No problem. In fact, it takes like 4 clicks even using a GUI, as you've seen. You know, we've dropped this probably 5 times tonight, recreated it. So, and what's nice is those steps are the exact same whether I have 3 tables like mine or if I had 100. So, you know, people in real life that are building all these tables, you know, they'll have a Git repository that is a script to basically recreate their database, because you know, it's granted they won't have a script that will seed all their production data, but you know, a lot of times like with testing, if you know, like if you're working like DevOps, or even, yeah, like DevOps, you'll basically spin up a new database and you might pull some old data over, but a lot of times you'll fill, like let's say you're building like a new functionality, you'll put in test data just like we're doing here, which is kind of the idea behind this project, is to kind of walk through like, hey, as if you were in your own kind of development environment, kind of doing this for real. So yeah, great question.
Thank you. Excellent answer.
Yep. Awesome. Any other questions? I don't want to go too much over. We're 4 minutes over. Want to make sure I'm conscious of your time as well. So any last questions before we call it quits here? All right, perfect. Well, if anything comes up this week, feel free to let me know. as far as like the weekly content, make sure to check out those quick bite videos that were posted in the announcement. They should cover kind of like the bulk. Like I said, it's not super complex, and we kind of went over a little bit last week as well. But if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, hope you have a great week.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.